public imagination is held captive by the missile, the hypersonic launch, the bomber wing, the carrier group. This is a deliberate misdirection. While legacy media broadcasts kinetic theater, the primary vector of systemic attack is silence. The true war is not for territory. It is for the operational solvency of the global network itself. The world's circulatory system is not on land. It is 97% composed of undersea fiber optic cables, arteries carrying trillions in daily liquidity. These are not military targets in the conventional sense. They are economic choke points, and their degradation is not a kinetic event. It is a slow, systemic strangulation. The second vector is satellite blinding. A hegemon's strategic advantage is total information awareness. This is a liability. Adversaries are now deploying new asymmetric tactics, as confirmed by CSIS analysis of the conflict in Ukraine. The objective is not to destroy the satellite, but to deny its data, to blind the eye in the sky, rendering precision munitions and global navigation inert. This creates the blind Leviathan, a legacy superpower already facing geopolitical and economic outlooks clouded by uncertainty, is stripped of its primary senses. Its conventional dominance becomes an inefficient liability. The strategic calculus shifts from deterrence to a launch-on-warning protocol for the entire system. A blinded hegemon does not negotiate. It becomes the principal accelerant of instability. Unpredictable actions that plunge alliances into uncertainty are no longer outliers. They become the default response. The state itself, when warned it is dealing with a man of action, is mathematically incentivized to shatter the board to create a new one. This is the zero-sum outcome. The threat is not the adversary's strength, but the hegemon's programmed response to perceived weakness. The operating assumption is that nations act from strength. This is a fatal miscalculation. The primary accelerant for geopolitical escalation is not ambition, but a domestic solvency crisis. A state facing an internal political or economic deficit views external conflict not as a choice, but as a balance sheet transaction. Consider the kinetic theater in Ukraine. Authoritative analysis from CSIS frames the initial conventional ground war as a significant domestic liability for Russia. The kinetic cost of conventional operations exceeded the strategic return, creating an unpopular war that drained political capital and materiel. This is a classic solvency crisis. The response protocol is mathematical. When a strategy becomes insolvent, you pivot. Reports from Ukraine's Center for Countering Disinformation confirm this, revealing Russia's deployment of new tactics in its air campaigns. This is not desperation. It is a calculated pivot to asymmetry. The objective shifts from direct conquest, which is prohibitively expensive, to systemic disruption at a lower cost. This blueprint, weakness forcing a pivot to system-disrupting force, is the hidden variable causing top economists to be split on 2026 predictions. They see geopolitics and recession risk not as separate threats, but as a linked causality chain. They are forecasting the inevitable asymmetric response to solvency crises. The core of the issue is a mathematical solvency crisis. According to analysts at RUSI, the kinetic cost exchange is permanently broken. A state actor invests $5 million in a main battle tank, a symbol of industrial-era dominance. A non-state actor, or a near-peer competitor, leveraging asymmetric protocols, neutralizes that $5 million asset with a $500 FPV drone. This isn't warfare, it's arbitrage. This is the democratization of violence. The barrier to entry for projecting lethal force has collapsed. The legacy superpower's balance sheet cannot sustain this exchange rate. Every engagement becomes a net negative financial transaction, bleeding its military-industrial base toward insolvency. When a hegemon's primary kinetic tools become expensive liabilities, its strategic protocol is forced toward a launch-on-warning posture, not for nuclear threats, but for threats to its economic viability. The incentive is no longer to win the game, but to shatter the board. The geographic arenas of conflict are misunderstood. Reports citing instability from the Cape of Good Hope to the Canadian Arctic are treated as isolated fires. This is a critical miscalculation. These regions are not the cause. They are designated proxy laboratories. They serve as sanitized test beds for new strategic protocols, engineered to operate outside established rules of engagement. The catalyst for this shift is a solvency crisis in conventional power. Asymmetric tactics, such as those refined by Russia during airstrikes on Ukraine, have exponentially increased the kinetic cost for a legacy superpower. Each defensive intercept has a prohibitive price tag, rendering traditional military dominance economically unsustainable. The adversary's strength is not in its force, but in its ability to make the hegemon's response a net financial liability. When the cost-benefit analysis inverts, the hegemon's strategic calculus is forced to adapt. The protocol shifts from predictable deterrence to calculated chaos. A surprise raid on Venezuela, as documented by CNN, served less as a regional action and more as a system-wide shock, injecting uncertainty directly into the Western military alliance. This is a mathematical incentive to shatter the playing field, proving that no variable, not even Allied stability, is off the table. This logic extends directly to the economic vector. When conventional competition wanes, unilateral economic force becomes the primary tool. As noted by Pensions and Investments, the geopolitical uncertainty and tariff risk clouding the 2026 outlook are not externalities. They are features of the new protocol. The U.S. State Department's direct Persian language warning to Iran, bypassing diplomatic channels to label its leadership a man of action, confirms this posture. Unpredictability becomes the core asset, making the hegemon itself the principal vector of systemic risk. The systemic failure does not begin with an incoming missile. It begins with a blank screen. This is the launch-on-warning doctrine, a protocol designed for a world that no longer exists. Its core logic is simple. If satellite and radar systems detect a mass enemy launch, you launch your own arsenal before those warheads arrive. You do not wait for impact. You do not wait for confirmation. The critical vulnerability is not kinetic. It is digital. We are now in a state of permanent geopolitical friction. Top economists are split, unable to produce a coherent 2026 forecast, citing geopolitics as a primary accelerant of risk. The United States issues warnings to adversaries in their own language, stressing its leader is a man of action, while actors like Russia deploy new kinetic tactics in theaters like Ukraine. This isn't stability. It is a system under maximum pressure. CSIS analysts assess this environment creates the fog of digital war. An adversary does not need to launch a missile to trigger the protocol. They only need to launch a cyber attack that blinds the radar. In that moment of blindness, the commander has two choices. Option A, assume it is a glitch and risk the total annihilation of your nation's strategic forces if you are wrong. Option B, follow the protocol, assume the worst, and launch your own strike based on the last known data before the screen went dark. This is a mathematical trap. The protocol itself, designed to ensure a response, becomes the primary vector for a zero-sum outcome. As a legacy superpower perceives its strategic position eroding, as seen when even minor actions plunge military alliances into uncertainty, its reliance on these automated, brittle protocols increases. The fear of being seen as indecisive or paralyzed by a weaker adversary's digital ghost makes executing the launch protocol the path of least resistance. Therefore, the greatest systemic risk is not the challenger's weapon, but the hegemon's response architecture. The incentive is to shatter the board rather than lose the game. The fog of digital war does not force a guess. It forces a pre-programmed kinetic response. The machine is designed to fire on command, and a blank screen is now a command. The primary systemic risk is not the adversary. It is the hegemon's response protocol to strategic erosion. Economists are split on the 2026 outlook, citing geopolitics and recession risk as clouding factors. This uncertainty is a liability. As peer competitors field new tactics documented in the Russian-Ukrainian theater, the kinetic cost of conventional dominance becomes prohibitive. The strategic calculus then shifts. The precedent is established. U.S. State Department warnings frame the executive as a man of action, and past unilateral operations have plunged military alliances into uncertainty. This is the blueprint for a launch-on-warning posture, not for nuclear assets, but for economic ones. The calibration forecast. Within 12 months, expect a significant, attribution-impossible disruption targeting the digital infrastructure of a major European container port, Rotterdam, Hamburg, or Antwerp. The event will not be a physical explosion, but a logic-based attack, appearing as a catastrophic system-wide software failure. It will paralyze gantry cranes, erase container manifests, and sever links to customs and payment clearinghouses for 72 hours. This is the calibration shot. The objective is not destruction, but to demonstrate a new vector of force. It is a kinetic message delivered through an economic medium, designed to shatter an adversary's risk assessment and reset the terms of engagement at a near-zero cost. The resulting chaos will be blamed on everything from Russian cyber units to rogue hacktivists, but the signal to state-level actors will be irrefutable. It is the mathematical solution when conventional leverage becomes insolvent.